You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now, let's go over some context, and I will give you my thoughts on it. So, the Houston Texans, their offensive coordinator job is open because they recently fired Bobby Slowik. And Syracuse had the number 7 total offense in the country in 2024 under Jeff Nixon, with Kyle McCord leading the nation in passing yards. And given Jeff Nixon's success with Kyle McCord and the Houston Texans having C.J. Stroud, who just had a little bit of a sophomore slump, it's no wonder why the Texans are at least interested in interviewing for Jeff Nixon. And we'll see whether or not this actually pans out and Nixon ultimately goes to the Houston Texans. But obviously, there's interest because, well, they got their own franchise quarterback. You look at what he just did with Kyle McCord. It kind of makes sense why they would want to hire a guy like Jeff Nixon. So I have 2 takeaways from this. Let's start off with welcome to the good season tax, ladies and gentlemen. The good season tax. When a team is successful, no matter the level, no matter the sport, other teams are going to come calling about the coaches. We see this in literally every sport at every level. And Jeff Nixon, and Syracuse for that matter, had a tremendous season. As I told you, they had the number 7 total offense in the country. Kyle McCord was amazing. The team went 10-3. So it's no wonder why a guy like Jeff Nixon is going to get called for promotions. Offensive coordinator potentially with the Texans. We also saw him appear in rumors for the Temple head coaching job. Now, that didn't end up happening. Fran Brown turned it away pretty quickly. But we saw that happen as well with Jeff Nixon. And this is what I call the quote-unquote good season tax. Because whether Nixon leaves or not, teams are going to call. That's just how it goes when your team, when your program, especially a program like Syracuse, has a really good season. And by the way, if the Orange have another good year in 2025, teams are going to call about Fran Brown. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Fran Brown's going to leave Syracuse football. But what I am saying is don't kid yourself. Let's say Syracuse, with that tough schedule they got in 2025, they go 8-4, 9-3 again. Teams are going to call about Fran Brown. Doesn't mean he's going to take it. It doesn't mean he's even going to be interested in it. But he's going to get that. His phone is going to ring. That's just how it works. It's called the good season tax, which is a good thing, by the way. The good season tax is a positive step for a program, for a team. An example that I came up with is the Detroit Lions in the NFL. The Detroit Lions, granted, they got knocked out early in the playoffs. They got upset by the Commanders. But in the regular season, they went 15-2. They lost both their coordinators to head coaching jobs in the NFL. Ben Johnson went to the Bears. Aaron Glenn to my favorite team, the New York Jets. I wish him the best, obviously. But that's a great sign of a competent organization. They just had a quote-unquote good season, and they lose both their coordinators. That's how it goes. And so for Syracuse, whether Nixon gets the job or not, it is a positive step in the right direction. Which leads me to number 2. I am not worried just yet about Jeff Nixon leaving Syracuse. Selfishly, I want Jeff Nixon to stay. Why? Well, they just had an elite offense. It's late January. Connecting the dots here, it's kind of late. Who is going to be the offensive coordinator if Jeff Nixon goes? So selfishly, I would want him to stay. And it also should be noted that his son, Will Nixon, is currently on the team. Whether that plays a factor or not in Jeff Nixon's decision, I am not entirely sure. But it should be noted that his son is literally on the team. Now, if Jeff Nixon ends up leaving, of course, I will be happy for him personally, and I'll be happy for the program in general because it's a good sign when other teams are calling and poaching your coaches. So I'll be happy for him, right? However, I'm not going to worry, and nor should you really, about something that has not happened yet. It hasn't happened. I mean, if he leaves, then we'll talk about potential offensive coordinator replacements. Nunzio Campanelli, I think, would be the quarterback coach. I think he would maybe be an offensive coordinator. But there's no time to really worry about that right now. Jeff Nixon is still the offensive coordinator of Syracuse football. Of course, after a great season, there's going to be conversations about him landing potentially another job. Per ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, he did interview with the Houston Texans, and it was reported last night. But for now, the status quo remains the status quo. So for Syracuse, it's the good season, ladies and gentlemen. Good season tax. I love to hear from you in the comment section below your thoughts on Jeff Nixon interviewing for the Houston Texans offensive coordinator job. If you are a Houston Texans fan, I'll let you know right now, I think it would be a good hire for you all. I don't know how many Houston Texans fans are watching or listening to a Locked On Syracuse podcast, but if you did stumble upon it, I welcome you. It's a great hire. He runs a spread offense if they were to do it. And I think CJ Stroud, I would draft him in fantasy if you hire him.